Introduction. The Battle of Borodino occurred on the 7th of September 1812 during Napoleon's invasion of Russia. The Grande Armée defeated the Russian army but suffered heavy losses and failed to achieve a decisive victory. Napoleon faced General Mikhail Kutuzov, who replaced Barclay de Tolly after the Battle of Smolensk. The Russian forces retreated while Napoleon stayed on the battlefield. The weakened Grande Armée occupied Moscow, which the Russians had intentionally left as bait. Criticized by historians, Napoleon's failure to annihilate the Russian army and his hesitation to use the Imperial Guard allowed the Russians to continue their retreat. With approximately 250,000 soldiers involved, it was the bloodiest day of the Napoleonic Wars. Background. Napoleon's invasion of Russia in 1812 began with the crossing of the Niemen River. The Russian army, outnumbered, employed a delaying tactic and retreated further east. After the Battle of Smolensk, General Barclay de Tolly was replaced by Kutuzov, who sought a battleground and established a defensive line near Borodino. The Battle of Shevardino, a delaying effort, took place with heavy casualties. The French advanced unexpectedly, causing the Russian formation to disarray. Russian forces withdrew and established a makeshift position. The Russian army consisted of 155,200 troops, while the French had 128,000 troops with the Imperial Guard held in reserve. Battle. The Battle of Borodino, fought between the French and Russian armies during the Napoleonic Wars, took place on September 7, 1812. The Russian position at Borodino consisted of earthworks and thick woods that made it difficult for the French to deploy and control their forces. The Russian army was divided into the First Army under Barclay on the right and the Second Army under Bagration on the left. However, the Russian left flank was left vulnerable when the French captured the village of Shevardino. The battle began with the French attempting to seize the Russian positions known as the Bagration flèches, which supported the Russian left. Despite some initial success, the French were eventually repelled by Russian counterattacks. The fighting was intense, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The Russian command structure fell apart when Bagration was wounded and removed from the battlefield, causing morale collapse among the Second Army. Meanwhile, the French also launched attacks on the Raevski redoubt and the village of Utitsa. The redoubt changed hands several times during the battle, but ultimately the French were able to capture it. However, their attempts to break through further were thwarted by the Russian Guard cavalry. During the battle, a Cossack raid on the Russian right flank delayed the French attack on the Raevski redoubt, giving the Russians time to reassess the situation and send reinforcements to the front line. The delay played a significant role in the outcome of the battle. In the end, the Battle of Borodino was a costly engagement for both sides, but it did not result in a decisive victory for either. The Russian army retreated, allowing the French to occupy Moscow, but the Russian strategy of scorched earth tactics and the harsh Russian winter eventually forced the French to retreat from Russia. The battle is often considered one of the bloodiest of the Napoleonic Wars. Aftermath. The Battle of Borodino during the Napoleonic Wars was a Pyrrhic victory for Napoleon. Despite capturing Moscow, his armies suffered heavy losses and were weakened by attrition warfare. The Russian army lured and trapped the French forces in the city, which was burned and abandoned. Napoleon's demand for surrender went unanswered, and as winter set in, he attempted to retreat. The Imperial Russian army launched a massive attack, using attrition, guerrilla warfare, and total war tactics to further weaken the French. The French army, exhausted and beaten from previous resistance, faced logistical challenges and starvation. Of the over 600,000 soldiers who invaded Russia, fewer than 100,000 returned. The battle had a significant impact, costing Napoleon the war and leading to the collapse of his empire. The battle's legacy is commemorated in literature, music, film, reenactments, and various memorials.